So let's salute the three jewels to start. I'll just turn my computer towards my shrine. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Namah. Om Ahum. So first of all, I want to just recap on last week. So last week and through the week, through the emails that I hope you've all been receiving. We've been focusing on the body and the physical senses, smells, tastes, sounds, sights, sensations of touch and seeing to what we see. So simple moments of awareness, being present to what's happening through our senses, both in times of formal practice and outside of formal practice in daily activities. So I talked a bit about the quality of that awareness or mindfulness. It's relaxed, receptive. It's a small amount of energy or effort needed, but very regularly, remembering to be aware or reminding ourselves to be aware. If you remember that exercise, touching hands, that gives a sense of the quality or the amount of energy needed. Sometimes talked about as emotional engagement or interest rather than effort. There's a line in the Satipatthana Sutta which says, we are mindful to the extent necessary for bare knowing and continuous mindfulness. We are mindful to the extent necessary for bare knowing and continuous mindfulness. So there isn't a lot of focus on concentration or focusing down or using a lot of effort in this particular approach. So it's a broad, spacious awareness and more in quality, a bit more like just sitting practice, which I imagine some of you are familiar with. So I said last week that body and mind are our field of investigation. The naturalist has all of nature to observe, and what we are observing are the nature of body and mind. So last week we were starting to look at the body not just as one thing, but as a number of processes going on. So the process of smelling, of tasting, of touching, through the different senses, the different physical senses, you have these processes that we can be aware of moment to moment. They're always accessible, or at least one of them is always accessible in the present moment. So we're less concerned with what we're tasting or touching or smelling, and more concerned with knowing how those processes feel, with recognizing those processes as they're working in the mind. So having looked a little bit, and we're really just scraping the surface of what could be said here, but hopefully you get a sense of it through the week. Having looked at the physical senses, we're going to this week look at the mind sense. In Buddhism, the mind is a sixth sense. So the mind, we don't mean the brain here. So the brain is part of the body, but consciousness, that which we call mind. So if you want to locate this within the Satipatthana Sutta, The third Satipatthana is Chitta, and this translates as mind or mind-heart. But within this quite broad definition of mind, we're also going to be looking, there's also the second Satipatthana, which is called Vedana, or feeling. So if you like, it comes into the territory of mind. So the Buddhist tradition says that mind has no color, no shape or form. You can't find the mind in any particular location. We can't say, here is my mind, this is what it looks like. We can do that with the body, if you like. We can conceptualize around the body. This is my body, we can say. And we can touch the body, we can see the body, we can see somebody else's body, but we can't do that with the mind. And yet we can know the mind. We can know the mind through its activities, through the activities and the functions of the mind. So things like thinking. Thinking is a function of mind, or an activity of mind. Imagining, perceiving, attending to something, knowing something, remembering something, and being aware. So awareness is an aspect of mind, and obviously there are lots of others, but that's just to give you the flavor. So quite often I'll talk about this practice as a watching the mind, watching the mind. And that's not to the exclusion of the body. When I say watching the mind, it doesn't mean that we don't know, or we're not aware of what's happening in the body. Through watching the mind, we're able to be aware of what's happening throughout the six senses. And mind and body work together. I think perhaps in the West, for the last couple of 100 years, we've been used to seeing them quite separately, mind and body. But actually, before that, and certainly in the East, in India, there's not that sense of separation. So body and mind have this very sort of complex interrelationship. So they're not separate, but sometimes it's helpful to distinguish what's a mental process and what's a physical process. So how do we know we have a mind? That's one of those head-banging sort of questions. We know we have a mind through being aware of the processes that I've just described. When we recognize that thinking's happening in the mind, when we recognize feeling, which is also a mental function, then we're knowing the mind. When we recognize perception working in the mind, then we can say that we're aware of the mind. Sometimes we can be aware that we're aware. We can recognize the quality of awareness, almost as an object in itself, and then we're aware of the mind. So I think when we're watching the mind, or talking about watching the mind, it's important to do it in quite a soft way, or quite a subtle way. We can't sort of stare down the mind. I'm going to look at the mind. If we put too much energy or too much determination almost to watch the mind, we can be using a sort of energy that's not quite subtle enough. So that quality of relaxing back or settling back that I talked about last week is really important. And that sense of almost recognizing, watching the mind out of the corner of our mind's eye. not sure how well that translates out of English. Usually we say we watch things out of the corner of our eye, but if you like here, I'm just adding this, the corner of the mind's eye. So mind objects like thinking or deciding or perceiving are quite subtle. So again, we need this sort of quality of gentleness and sensitivity in how we notice, how we observe. So sometimes I use an analogy of being in a bird hide. So there's a particular bird hide I have in mind when I'm thinking about this, and there's a bird reserve, a nature reserve on the east coast of England. So the bird reserve actually goes to the sea, and you've got a few trees that still have their roots in the sand, and each day the tide comes in and covers these trees in water. It's a very interesting location, but you have bird hides that you can sit in and you can watch. I've actually seen a number of quite a variety of bird hides when I've been on retreat in Europe. So the ones I've seen in Slovakia and the Czech Republic are quite high up in trees. I think that's the same in Finland as well, and possibly in Sweden, I'm not sure, but you climb up a ladder to get to your bird hide, where you can also see quite a few animals as well. So sitting in the bird hide, in a way, there's not much to do. There's not much to do, but we can't go to sleep. We can't really tune out, because then we can miss what's happening. We can miss maybe a movement in some reeds across the water, or we can miss perhaps a bird that just comes in. So we need to be present. But if we're too focused on one area, on one part of the reeds or another part of the lake, we'll miss what's happening. So we need to have this soft, relaxed gaze that can almost see round corners. So obviously I'm using the visual sight as a metaphor for all our senses. If we can relax the senses, relax the mind sense, to have this sort of spaciousness and breadth, then we get more of a view of what's happening in the mind. And this is quite important because, well, maybe I'll say why. I'll say more later about why, but it means that we're able to, if you like, make sense of what we see eventually, if we can have this broad, spacious awareness. And the experience can be quite ordinary. It might just be a few ducks, might be nothing particularly special. But then just every now and again, there might be something that perhaps you've not seen before. Keeping with the bird analogy, you might see a cormorant or a heron, or something that's a little bit more unusual. But you need to be present, you need to be attending, but in this very relaxed, open way, and quite repeatedly. So there's some sense of continuity of awareness. And as I said, quite often the experience feels a bit ordinary, like nothing special. A duck is nothing special to me. But when we have this attitude, if you like, of it's quite ordinary, it's even a bit dull, there's nothing special, then we're a bit more likely to switch off and not be present. So if we have the attitude that this moment is fresh, this moment has never happened before. So our attention is less on the object or what's being seen, and it's more on the quality of mind. This quality of awareness is new. It's It's not the same as before. It can never be the same as before. It's this moment arising, and this moment, and this moment. So I think often what we're doing when we relate to experience as, oh, it's a bit dull, it's all happened before, or yes, I know what that is. We have a sense of relating to an idea. We're relating to concepts about what we know, rather than the direct experience in the moment. That experience that has never happened before, that moment that has never happened before, that freshness with which we come to it. So it's a shift in emphasis from, if you like, content or idea that has a label, has a mental label. So it's a bird, it's a car, it's my body, to process, seeing, hearing, imagining. Yeah. So what we're doing in awareness is looking to pay more attention to the direct level of experience, rather than our ideas about what's happening. Sorry, I've got a little Zoom hitch coming up. So when we're in touch with a sense of process, experience being processed, we're in connection with something that is changing, that has a sense of flow. It's less fixed, it's less it rather than fixity, it has this sense of movement, of flow. So it's one reason why we want to, in a way, be a little bit more with the experience rather than the content. And it's one of the reasons for watching the mind. But we also watch the mind rather than the content, rather than these different objects of experience. Because with awareness, we can learn to see a little bit more objectively. Mindfulness helps us to become a bit more objective about what it's aware of, what's being noticed. And particularly with watching the mind, we become mindful of our usual habitual views and perspectives. So we are always coming from some sort of view. There are a lot of ideas that play in the back of our minds. We always have our own point of view. We may not realize that. We may not be able to say, oh, this is the view that I'm coming from. And that's partly because they are so close to us. They're like a second skin, if you like, often very implicit. We are more likely to become aware of the view that we're coming from when we come up against somebody else's view. And perhaps it's they disagree with us, or we find ourselves disagreeing with them. So it's not until we're challenged that we often realize, oh yeah, there was some sort of idea in the mind, there was some view that is influencing where I'm coming from. So I want to shift from talking about the mind to talking about right view. So we're actually bringing in 3 of the Satipatthanas, well, all 4 of the Satipatthanas this week, because right view I talk about as being very closely related to the 4th Satipatthana of dhammas, dhammas or phenomena. So if you like, what we're looking at here, how this is often translated, is the perspective. Dhammas, or right view, is the perspective from which we can helpfully view the rest of our experience. So to use a metaphor, helped by a scholar called Richard Gombrich. He's one of the translators from the last century. And he talks about Buddhist coloured spectacles. So it's a very old-fashioned word, but Buddhist coloured glasses. And he uses this to describe, in a way, how we are usually coming from a view, but we don't realise it. It's like we're seeing through different lenses, and they're the lenses of our attitudes, our beliefs, our conditioned views. We all have a lot of conditioning. We've all been conditioned in many, many different ways to become the unique beings that we are. We have a lot in common, but we also have our own uniqueness. So usually we're seeing subjectively, we're seeing through the lens of our own conditioning, our social conditioning, our educational conditioning, whether we come from a wealthy or poor family background, whether we come from a particular political perspective. So we have various layers and levels of conditioning that influence us. Many, many other factors, including karmic factors. So what do we come into the world with? Sometimes we can see that. Well, also our genetic conditioning. So what we experience is filtered through what we already know, and how we felt in the past when we've experienced something similar beforehand. We know that we like Indian food, or we know that we don't like watching football on the television. You know, there's many things we can know about ourselves, part of our and some of these things are, they all form part of the views and ideas about ourselves and about others and about our world. So when we're looking through, it's not, if you like, that we have one lens that we look through. We have all these different lenses, but often, well, we can talk about these lenses in relation to beliefs and also in relation to emotions. So, for instance, if you put the red tinted glasses on, perhaps then everything that you see is tinted through the lens of anger. Yeah, you're in a mood, you're in a bad mood, maybe just woke up like it, or something's happened. Everything we see is often then slightly coloured, sometimes more than slightly coloured, through that particular perspective, that particular colouring. Or it might be the colour of craving or attachment. There's something that we want, or maybe we're just in that slightly restless mood where we don't know whether we want to we want something to eat, or we want to look at our phones, or there's a slightly unsatisfied feeling. So you can pick your own colours, but just using this metaphor as a to get a sense of how these different things, different colourings affect us without us knowing. There might be a colouring of strong self-interest. I think there often is. What's in it for me? How does this impact on me? What's happening? How do I get what I want? So we mostly live these habitual lives with habitual responses, and we've been very, very strongly conditioned into them. So I think it's important that that we don't blame ourselves for this, if you like. This is the conditioning that's, in a way, it's all a given. It's all already happened. It's already there. Often our responses go unnoticed and go unseen. So one of the things that we're trying to do with this perspective of right view is to see these responses and reactions, these conditioned, habitual ways of being, to see them a bit more clearly. And the qualities of mindfulness, of a receptive, non-judging attitude. We don't need to take a view on our habitual views, if you like. If we can just recognize them for what they are. This is a craving in the mind at the moment, or this is aversion in the mind at the moment. So we're not trying to change or interfere with what's happening, but we're trying to see it more clearly, see it through awareness, and that will have its own impact. That will have its own influence on our experience. So awareness, a couple more of the qualities of awareness. Awareness is impartial. So it doesn't pick or choose its objects. So it doesn't play into the mind that's influenced by greed or craving, that does want to pick what it wants, or the mind that's influenced by aversion, which wants to push away certain things. So although awareness is impartial and it doesn't pick and choose, it still sees clearly, and it still recognizes what is helpful to practice, what decreases suffering, and what's a skillful choice. It recognizes skillful and unskillful. So we're watching the mind in order to be able to recognize these quite complex, quite subtle aspects of mind, emotions, ideas, views, and assumptions. Assumptions are great. They're just things that we just don't know that we have them until we come up against somebody else's assumptions. So the teacher I sit with in Burma, he would sometimes say assumptions, presumptions, and speculations are all the work of moha. So moha may well be a new word. I like using the original because I think it's quite suggestive. Moha is delusion or ignorance. So he says assumption, presumption, and speculation are always the work of delusion, of moha. Because they're always a bit of a guess, they're always guesswork, rather than being with what's actually happening or what's actually experienced. So one of the things that we notice along with these assumptions and views and ideas is we notice this sense of identification. We see where we identify with certain things as being important to me or belonging to me in some way. And we can notice in awareness how that feels. I think noticing how things feel is really important. It takes it away from becoming too heady or too just getting caught in a different way of conceptualizing. So how does the mind that's grasping, the mind that's craving feel? How does that feel in the mind, and how does it feel in the body? What happens in the body? Is there a sense of relaxation or a sense of contraction? So there's many ways that we can notice, that we can observe what's happening. And sometimes it will be observing that sense of identification or attachment. We can talk about it as attachment. So I just want to say a couple of things about identification and attachment in relation to right view. So of course, the Buddha, I think this is actually a song line, but I think the Buddha might have said it as well. The root cause of suffering is desire. The root cause of suffering is desire. And Nalio has, he says, when something is important to us, so when we're attached to something, often it feels important to us. He says, when something is important to us, we make a nest of it. So you did hear right, this is a nest, like a bird's nest in the tree. So when something's important, it's like we want to settle down in it. We want to make ourselves comfortable. We want to sort of gather those important things around us and keep them close. And actually our nest might be quite uncomfortable. It might have these twigs that stick into us, or it might be a bit dirty or full of rotting, half-dead leaves. But it's familiar to us. And so therefore it feels safe. It helps us to feel secure. So we often have a lot of attachment to our emotions as well as our views. And that's understandable. We'll be looking at these in more detail over the next couple of weeks. So why it's understandable, we miss sometimes that is causing us suffering. So a little quote. This is from Byron Katie, who's an American woman. I don't think she's a Buddhist. She's someone who has a degree of self-realization. Very interesting story if we had more time. And she says, we don't attach to people or things. And that's interesting because I think often if you were to be asked, you know, what are you attached to? You might say, well, I'm really attached to my partner. I'm really attached to my children. Or I'm really attached to my dog. I'm really attached to my house. You know, there's various things. And she's saying we don't attach to people or things. We attach to uninvestigated concepts that we believe to be true in the moment. So she's saying we get attached to ideas. We get attached to ideas. My partner somehow belongs to me, or my children belong to me. So there's an idea that we haven't really looked at it in awareness to see whether it's true, whether it's even possible. Yeah. So as I think I said, we're not trying to change our actively change our habits or our ideas, but by trying to think differently. But right view actually can help us observe more clearly what's actually happening and see whether it's in accord with our ideas about what we think is happening. So the more that you can have a sense of this distinction between we have ideas about things and we have a direct experience of what's happening, which we can know more clearly through mindfulness with this Dharma perspective, with a right view Dharma perspective. So you might think, well, why would I want to change, if you like, exchange one view, one coloured set of glasses for right view, for another view? So that would be a good question. So right view is not so much another view, but it's more, as I said, with this word dharmas, it's a perspective from which to be able to view all of experience. And it's a perspective that's just able to see without the colorings. It's a more benign perspective. So if you like, it's seeing through clear glasses rather than ones that are tinted or colored in any particular way. It helps us see, right view helps us see how we are relating to experiences. It helps us see if the relationship is one of craving, of wanting, or one of aversion or pushing away. It helps us see if the relationship is one of love or generosity or any of the other skillful qualities that we're looking to grow, to cultivate and to grow. So if you like, the task of right view is to see more clearly and to see what that relationship to experiences is like. Sometimes it will we'll be able to see how much identification with the experiences. Oh, this is about me. This is all about me. Yeah. So there's a lot that we can learn through having this quite simple perspective where we're just looking to see things more objectively and to recognize, if you like, that subjective relationship to experience. And we don't need to do more than that. We don't need to try and not have a more personal or more subjective relationship to experience. But if we recognize that, that's huge. That's huge. So rather than being completely caught in it, we're able to see that, able to recognize, oh, okay. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. We've got a few minutes if there are questions, and then we'll have just a couple of minutes leg stretch before we break. But yeah, really encourage you that if you have any questions or comments, then yeah, please do ask. This can be slightly abstract material, so sometimes the questions of clarification can be helpful, not just for you if you have one, but for other people who are wondering the same thing.
I have a question.
So, and you are?
I'm Deirdre.
Deirdre.
Or maybe, yes, I forgot. I'm meant to be Dee. I forgot.
Yeah, no, I see you. I see you. Hi.
I actually have a question about just the last thing you said when you were sort of saying that right view helps us see how we relate to our experience. Do you sort of mean in that like a benchmark, you know, like something to compare to, or maybe I missed exactly?
Okay, I just mean in that moment. So these views that are often quite implicit are point of view which are quite hard to see.
Mm-hmm.
If the right view, if you like, can help if you like, because we're not so much attending to the object or the happening at the end of the process. We're sort of, in a way, sitting back quietly here in the bird hide of the mind. So we get a bit of we see a bit more, we see more clearly, and we can recognize, this is where I was coming from when I said that to that person. Didn't quite realize it, but no, I could have a sense of what was happening in the body, what was happening in the mind. Maybe there was a subtle thought that prompted what I said. So we've got more information. That's the main thing with right view. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I have a small question as well.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
It's maybe a stupid one, but if, for example, we wake up in the morning and we feel this classes of angerness, and throughout the day, like when we have this kind of moments where we reflect and start to feel in the body and be aware of the mind, like the emotion, and if through the whole day we still feel like the emotion of angerness, and every time we notice it, is another way, like I'm just a bit not scared, but to concentrate on the angerness. But yeah, I don't know how to deal between being aware of it and not making it bigger. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a really good question. It's a really good question. So if you're able to be aware of, there's one thing to be aware of the anger, and then there's another thing to be aware of. So if you like, the anger becomes the object. It's like the end of the story, and when we're looking a bit closer to home, it's like, how am I relating to that experience? Is it a bit more unbiased or neutral? What was the other word I used? Impartial. Is there an impartial, or am I a bit scared of that anger, or I feel aversion in relation to that anger? So that's what we can learn through settling back and through relaxing. We can see what's the relation. And if there can be a quality of interest, that you're able to see more what's happening in the mind, then you just notice what happens. I think one of the things is that we don't always, we're not practicing in order to make things go away. Maybe that's the best way to say it. So it might be that anger grows, but if you can keep watching, see what happens then. Maybe a bit more interest comes in, or a bit more awareness comes in, and suddenly you're aware of anger in the mind in a different sort of way, in maybe a slightly new way. So it's a way you can play with it and you can experiment with it, but seeing how you're relating to it, there are certain ways of relating to it that will make it grow, and there are other ways. So we say we're aware of something, but if we're aware with fear or with aversion to what's happening, it's not really awareness, because it doesn't have that quality of allowing, that quality of being open to whatever's happening. So what we can do then is note, there's some fear, that's how I'm relating to it, and then that becomes what's noticed in awareness. And it's always if you think this is not helping, and it's starting to, particular mind state starting to overwhelm the mind, you think this is not helping awareness grow, so let's put it aside. Maybe I'll do some simple walking meditation, maybe I'll pay attention to my breath, maybe I'll do some metta. And you do that because the mind is getting a little bit overwhelmed. You don't do it to try and make the anger go away, but in a way, the mind is overwhelmed. It's not able to be aware. So you do something else, maybe a bit more neutral or a bit more positive, that helps the mind calm down, mind and body calm down. And once they're a bit more calm, then you have the choice. You have the choice to think, oh, well, that was that is anger still there? And now awareness has sort of grown a bit. Is it possible to go back and observe that and see what's happening? A friend of mine says, she says, sometimes awareness is like a mouse, and the emotion or the mind state is like a mountain. Sometimes it's just like that, and all we can do, if you like, is take our mousy awareness and help it grow a little bit, help it nurture it a little bit through an object that's a bit easier. Yeah. So that's quite a lot, and I don't expect you to remember all of that, but I may cover some more of it. But thank you for asking. Does that give you something to work with?
Yes, thank you.
Great. One more, maybe? Does anyone else?
I think I have a question.
Yeah, Tina.
Thank you. Because you said that, so how do we know we have a mind? You said that we know because we notice that we're aware, or we are feeling, or sort of mental processes. So it sounds like a little bit like we have one awareness that knows that we are sensing, and then we have another observing awareness that knows that we are sort of aware. Is that correct? Or it sounds like maybe we have some sort of two consciousnesses, or can you explain?
Yeah, great. So yeah, we have, if you like, we have sort of momentary consciousnesses, if you like. So because a new moment is always arising, so we can be aware of something in one moment, and then in the next moment we're aware of that we were aware of, if you like. So it's yeah, so if you yeah, not sure what more I can say. So it's very fluid, it's very flexible, but I think we're maybe used to something a bit more static. But if you think of that, the flow of moments which are happening quickly. So we can know something and then very, very quickly can feel almost simultaneous, but actually it's probably more that one happened a little bit after the next.
So they're more like after each other more than on top of each other.
Yeah, but the feeling, the subjective feeling, can be pretty much simultaneous. It depends how, in a way, your experience of what the mind feels like and what moments of awareness feel like will change, and it will change depending on how much awareness is there, whether awareness is like a mouse or whether it's like a mountain. The experience of it will feel different, and you'll probably notice new things, especially with continuity of mindfulness, especially when there are more moments where you feel present. Great, thank you. Good. Okay, let's have just 2 or 3 minutes leg stretch. Stand up, and then we'll sit. I'll guide us in a sit.
Yeah. So perhaps just as some people are still coming to their posture, but if you're already settled, then yeah, just be aware in the present moment. Start with that feeling into present moment awareness in a very ordinary sort of way, nothing special awareness. And you might start just with your eyes open and looking around the room even, or looking at your shrine if you have one. Coming to the meditation practice in a natural way that helps you relax quite naturally. And in your own time, coming to presence, coming to the present moment. There's no rush. Nothing to get down to in a hurry. Take all the time in the world. Seeing will be happening. Hearing will be happening. And perhaps senses of smell, almost certainly touch. And you might recognize certain things happening within the mind sense. And just acknowledging those, perhaps thinking, various images, ideas in the mind. You might recognize some of those thoughts, ideas, or images are connected with the past, something that's already happened. Or you might recognize there's a sense of anticipating, looking to something happening in the future. And just acknowledging those if they are arising. And with that acknowledgement, that recognition, just reminding yourself to be aware in the present moment. What's present now? What's actually happening? And it might seem like the bird hide when there's nothing really going on. Just settling back, just taking in subtlety. There's always something happening. through the senses. And when we're present, there's also the knowing of what's happening. Not only is seeing or hearing or thinking happening, but there can be the awareness of it. And if it's helpful, if your mind feels very scattered and it's hard to be present, then it can help to rest with perhaps one aspect of your experience to help things settle. So you might want to stay with the overall sense of the body, or perhaps the breath sensations, or sounds. But if your mind and body feel relatively settled, then you can just open to whatever experience arises. The attention can move between different senses, and awareness can know and recognize them. You might see if you can recognize in the mind some of the qualities of awareness. Along with receptivity and ease, there might be a sense of being open to whatever's happening. That awareness can know whatever's arising. The mind that's impartial or unbiased. There might be a sense of a broad, spacious awareness. or a simple knowing that you're in the present moment. Whatever's arising, you can be aware of how you're relating to that experience. You might be relating to it more as an idea or a concept, or a little bit more as a direct experience. Perhaps there's a sound, and the mind automatically labels it dog or car or bark. So the mind naturally labels experience. But along with the label, with the idea of dog, car, is the experience of hearing, of knowing sound. So see if you can notice any similar things happening with different senses. Perhaps there's a touch, clothing on your skin. That's the idea, but the experience, simply sensations. Or thinking is happening. You might find yourself getting caught up in the story, in the content. And just being aware of that. Perhaps dropping in the question, what does a thought feel like in the mind? What's the experience of thinking? And we're not asking a question to try and get an answer. But to help feel more deeply into the experience. Thought, sensation happening in awareness. And you might find it helpful to just let your attention shift between perhaps generally being with the body or with physical sensations, where we can ground and stabilize awareness. And then at times just opening up to anything in our experience, any object will do. You can also notice how you're relating to experience. In relation to right view. Is there a sense of relating to sights and sounds, mental objects, more personally, with some degree of identification? Or alternatively, there might be a sense of more objectivity. You're simply recognizing experiences happening within the body and mind. Happenings arisings, objects of experience. And whether we are relating to experience more personally or more impersonally, either way is to be celebrated. There's some degree of right view, a Dharma perspective. When we're able to relate to experience less personally, not through trying to do so, but through awareness doing its work, doing its job, recognizing clearly, kindly what's happening. Then there's less suffering in the mind, in the experience. And more freedom. And remembering every now and again to check the quality of the effort, interest. If we can simply be present, that will often be enough. Notice if you find yourself reaching out to experience, to objects. And just remembering to settle back into that broader, softer view. Staying close to the mind, staying close to awareness, recognizing whatever is happening. And when you're ready, just taking awareness out of one practice, sitting practice, but allowing the continuity of awareness to come with you as we return to the larger group just for a few minutes.